complicated process of identifying raptors so accessible. Tom has been a birder all of his life, and he has a PhD in ornithology. His career has focused on birds, their science, and conservation. After graduate school, he worked on Everglades and Florida Key protection, studying wading birds, white-crowned pigeons, and the ecosystems of South Florida. Then he moved to Washington, D.C. to work at the interface of science and policy. Before moving to Seattle, Tom served as chief scientist for National Audubon, helping them to integrate the work of BirdLife International across the Americas and advising the Department of the Interior on their guidelines for siting wind turbines. He remains active in pushing a conservation agenda. He is scientific advisor to BirdNote and recently finished a 6-year appointment on Washington's Audubon board. Most of Tom's time is spent spreading the wonder and fascination of birds and nations through writing and leading field trips and photography. And tonight he's going to share some of that wonder and fascination with us. So, and also if he will stop in the middle and give a time for questions. If people on Zoom can write their question in the chat box, and then again at the end. So please welcome Thomas Bancroft.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, everybody. Everybody can hear me okay, I hope. All right, let me see about sharing my screen. And then. There, hopefully that works. Everybody seeing the slide with 3 raptors on it? Somebody put their thumbs up. Hope so. All right.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So good evening, everybody. I'm really excited to be here and share some of this wonders of the natural world, wonders of birds with all of you. We're going to explore a bunch of stuff. We're going to ask a lot of questions tonight. It's going to be mind-boggling. I'm probably going to give you a headache. So just so you know. Now, my hope is just to fill you with lots of information to get you to start to think about raptors maybe a little different way. Maybe you're going to marvel a little more about them. Maybe you're going to be a little questioning about what you see the next time you're out there. Maybe you're going to just stand there with your jaw bouncing off the ground because these things are really pretty cool. I think curiosity is a really wonderful thing. And for me, the driver in agreeing to do this presentation was that I knew quite a bit about raptors, but there's a lot I don't know and didn't know. And there's still a lot I don't know. There's a lot that science doesn't know. It's a field that is just so fascinating with lots of cool things going. So we're going to explore that. So I want to phrase this evening in this way. So when you hear that word raptor, what do you think about? That's what it is right now. What do you think about? By the end of the evening, what I want you to think about a question is, what do I feel? How do I feel about them? So we're going to kind of work through all of that. So what the heck is a raptor? I think for most people, these are representatives of what pops into your mind. So we've got a peregrine falcon on the left. We've got a rough-legged hawk on the right. So we've got the falcons, we've got the hawks and the eagles in that bunch. And then we have an owl. This is a short-eared owl up there. So that what pops into people's minds probably. But what about these guys? All right, so we've got a raven and a northern shrike. Northern shrikes are ferocious predators. I mean, they just go after other birds. They go after insects like crazy. A raven's a omnivorous creature. It will eat anything it can, including capturing birds and capturing mice and all kinds of stuff. Are they raptors? How about these guys? All right, so on the left is a white-backed vulture. That's one of the African vultures, the old world vulture. And on the right is the turkey vulture. So we got vultures. They're eating dead stuff. Well, what about these guys? So on the left there, we've got a gray-headed gray-headed kingfisher. Now we think of kingfishers here as being fish eaters, but in a lot of the world, kingfishers are up in dry habitat too. This one's up in a dry habitat in Africa, feeds a lot on little things like mice and worms and grasshoppers and that kind of stuff. Or the black-shouldered kite, that's a close relative of our white-tailed kite we have in this country. It feeds a lot on insects. So, what about them? So how do we define raptors? That's interesting. It's got all of that up there. Okay, I don't know how to take that off the top up there on there. I apologize that maybe it will disappear. But what is a raptor? So the word raptor comes from, sorry, I'm dropping everything here. The word raptor comes from Latin, and it means to seize or take by force. Now, if you look up various definitions in Frank Gill's book, and that's there on the right, ornithology is kind of considered right now the classic textbook for ornithology in a college classroom. He defines it as falcons, caracaras, hawks, eagles, old world vultures, kites, ospreys, secretary birds, new world vultures. No owl in that list. That's the way I kind of remembered it from when I was in graduate school. But then you go to other groups, University of Minnesota's Raptor program, they define it as birds of prey. And then they talk about diurnal ones and nocturnal ones, so daytime and nighttime. So they got all the owls in there. Then if you go down to Wikipedia, they say raptors are hypercarnivorous. I like that word. Hypercarnivorous bird species that actively hunt and feed on other vertebrates, mainly mammals, reptiles, and other small birds. What about fish? What about amphibians? If you're eating those things, or you're not a raptor, then what about insects? What about dead stuff? So there's lots of definitions out there. What about this guy? So the term raptor is generally used just to refer to medium-sized bird like dinosaurs. I was coming across the bridge up at Deception Pass, and I think I saw one of these guys run across the road in front of me. I wanted to stop and go after it, but I knew I needed to be here on time. So, all right. So science, the process of science. There's a whole lot of words on here. I think what I want to get across, and there's 2 slides which are going to give you tons of words here, is the scientific process is this process of asking questions, collecting information, trying to understand what the information tells you, redoing those questions. It's a constant churning of it. The analogy I was thinking of is you make a pot of stew. You put some stuff in that stew, you taste it, you go, I don't have it quite right. You add some more stuff in that stew. You keep mixing in that stew until you get it just the way you're right. And day after tomorrow, you might decide, I don't like that. I'm going to take those potatoes out and put something else in there. That's what science is. It's this constant churning of process that we learn new things as we go along. So it's an aggregate on the bottom. Scientific knowledge is an aggregate. We're adding lots of stuff into it and chewing it up as we go along. So what does this mean about birds? How do we think about this group raptors, and what are they and where they go about? And so let's go back to 1966. I was a sophomore in high school, and my mother gave me my first birding book. She also gave me a pair of binoculars. I think she really didn't want me taking her book out in the field anymore, or her binoculars, but that's okay. I was really happy. And you can see I did not bring this copy, which I still have, of my birding book. I was so excited to have my own, because she had a Peterson's, but I got a Robbins. So I brought a newer version of a Robbins that I bought. I don't think it's even in print anymore. But anyways, things to note. We're thinking about raptors as we defined them earlier. What do we have on here? We have order Falconiforms, and under that we've got the New World vultures, kites, hawks, eagles, all that group. We've got accipiters, we've got the harriers, we've got the buteos, we've got osprey, we've got caracaras and the falcons down here. So we have all of that group. And then look, it's on page 64. We go over here to page 160, then we get all the owls. and we get it from the owls. So they're in very different places in the bird book. When they put things into the bird book, they're trying to use that science knowledge at the time this bird book is made in order to put the order of stuff in there. And it's generally thought of, they start with the ones that originate, that group who has traits that originated most longest ago is at the beginning, and then you work all the way through. So that's the plan. Just look at where those are right now. At this time, 1966. So when you think about that classification, you often hear it talk about in one of two ways. It's a Linnaeus system or it's cladistics, and there's people that say, I don't use the Linnaeus system because that was before they were really applying science in a lot of ways. I use the cladistic system. I don't know, all seems the same to me. But anyways, what it is, so our classification is we have this set that kind of tiers down. And so we start with class Aves here. Aves is, Aves. So Aves is all our birds. And then example here on the right, that bird on the right, which is a rough-legged hawk, fits into this old classification back in the 60s as falconiforms. It's in the family Accipitridae. It's in the genus Buteo with the species Lagopus. So that's the rough-legged hawk. So back then in the 60s, we've got this one group, the falconiforms, and then another group, the owls. Keep that in your back of your mind. Now I want to tell you an eBird story. So thank you for that very nice introduction. So I've been very involved with birds since I was a little tyke. My earliest memory is climbing into my mother's kitchen sink, I was raised on a farm, putting my feet and shoes right in the kitchen sink so I could see out the kitchen window, which is where she had a bird feeder. I was 5. She did not yell at me. Instead, she asked me what I was looking at, and there was turned out a black-capped chickadee out there. That's the first bird I learned how to identify, was the black-capped chickadee. So I've liked birds all along. So, I go through a whole bunch of bird stuff for a whole bunch of years, worked in Florida, worked in Washington, D.C., and I came out here and kind of fell out of lots of things for a few years. At the same time that I moved out here, my daughter, my only child, my daughter and her husband, they moved to Australia. She calls me and she says, Dad, we're getting married and we're moving to Australia in 2 weeks. I must not have quite said the right thing because she says, don't worry, Dad, it's only for 2 years. They're still in Australia. That was 2012. So anyways, I go to visit them occasionally. I'm over there visiting them. And after I'd visited them for a while, I'd hired a guide and I'm down birding in southern Australia. And we find this guy, a brown falcon. I pull up eBird. Now I'd been using eBird a lot because when I was with National Audubon as the chief scientist, I worked with Cornell a ton on eBird and on promoting it. So I pull it up and, I'm flipping through eBird. I get to all the hawks and so forth. I can't find falcons. I go up and down the list. I can't find falcons anywhere. So finally, I go back up and use the search, and there's falcons. And I found brown falcon, and I ordered it. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, there's all of these other birds now in this list, in between all the hawks and eagles and everything, and in between the falcons. What the heck's going on there? So when I came back, I started to read like crazy. And that's what we're going to talk about for much of the rest of tonight is what do we find out about how we're learning a whole lot more about what these group raptors are. And one of the critical things is genetics. Back on that original list that I showed you, that's all based upon morphology, based upon bone structure, muscle structure, a little bit about behavior. It's about looking at feathers, all those kinds of things. And I studied feathers for my master's thesis. My first job was working for Mary Clench at Carnegie Museum. She worked on muscle kinds of anatomies, and her boss, Ken Parks, worked on other things on birds. So, I knew kind of all of that. Yeah, then along about in the 80s, they started to figure out how to use genetics. And the first thing was they used DNA hybridization. And so in genetics, there's 2 kinds of genes that are critical in doing that. There's the ones that are in the nucleus, that's our DNA, our chromosomes. And then there's ones that are in the mitochondria. And so you have mitochondrial DNA. Now, the ones that are in our nucleus are the ones that are combined. We get half from the father and half from the mother, and they're combined that way. So you get this inheritance down there. the ones in the mitochondria only come from the mother. They only come from the female side. And so they're only passed down that way. And so they did a lot of stuff with the DNA out of our chromosomes, out of birds' chromosomes. Then they started looking at mitochondria DNA and did a lot of stuff with that. And then they started to kind of get more sophisticated. And now we're into a whole bunch of much more sophisticated stuff. And talk about giving yourself a headache. Try to read and understand that. It's really interesting, but I can't understand it. I'm not a geneticist, but they're getting into really doing some whole kinds of cool stuff. And this is just turning things upside down and over and around. And, you know, you may have noticed that every year when around early September or October, you might get a message from eBird that says, we've just updated the checklist here, and there's been these changes. A lot of that is now being a result of genetics and our understanding of the relationships between different birds. So you can look at that in various ways. There's this cool website called Avabase, and you can go in and go to any place in the world and get a checklist of birds of the world for that way. But you can put it in a whole bunch of different taxonomic orders, depending upon who you believe. Who you believe is, what is the set of assumptions they use when they put together that bigger checklist? Assumptions. We do assumptions everything, all the time, and that's part of how we live. You know, I make an assumption on how long it was going to take me to get up here. And I ran into traffic on I-5 and it was a half an hour longer. You know, you make assumptions. That's what life is. But as you can see on the bottom here, you can then pick a different way to see, well, what's the list? And they update this every year. So Clemens list version 2021 and eBird version 2021 are about the same things. But that's, you know, one of the kind of critical things. You may, if you use eBird and you go in and look at your eBird list, I just pulled up, doesn't go very far down on there, but the order of the birds in the eBird list is going to reflect its current understanding, Cornell's current understanding of what the relationships are of birds, and they put them in that order. Or if you go into birds of the world, you can go down through and look at all 10,800 or whatever there are right now, and they have write-ups on them, and it's all done in this systematic order. So where are we right now? As of day before yesterday when I put this slide together, because who knows, it could be different today. But as of right now, at that order level, that's the one that ends in FORMES, at that order level, we've got these three orders over here. The Cathariforms are the New World vultures. The Accipitriforms, I cannot do Latin, which are the hawks and eagles and that group. And then we've got the owls. Then in a whole separate group, farther down on the list, we've got these three closely related groups, which is the falcons, the parrots, and then all the perching birds. So why I couldn't find the falcon in the list is because at about 2015, they suddenly started to say, whoa, this evidence that we're getting from genetics is overwhelming. Falcons are not closely related to the hawks and the eagles in that group. They're actually more closely related to parrots and to passerines, to perching birds. And we got to put them over there. It's interesting, when that came out, there was a morphologist, a guy working in one of the museums, and he goes, oh, that's really interesting. You know, when I smell the skins, the skin of a falcon smells very different than the skin of a hawk. So even the feathers in there, you know, had this kind of different aroma to that. So anyways, we're here. So how do we start to look at that a little bit more? All right, you might have seen these kind of tree systems here, these family trees. What they're trying to do is show relationships. So on this left-hand side here is time, going back some time in the past. And we're going to get to more time ones down the line here. And then they're showing these kind of relationships on who is closely related to who. Now, this bottom section right here, this is from 2 or 3 years ago. that's all been changed around now. So, there's a little difference there. But what you're seeing is the really interesting two big groups here. We're seeing this group over here, which includes the hawks and owls. That's a mouse bird. This is all things like woodpeckers and a whole bunch of stuff like that are over in here. And then we're seeing this group over here. This is another bird, another one I can't pronounce very well. Sirmis? No, that's not. We'll see the word in a few minutes, and then maybe we can figure it out. Well, it's a South American bird here that's closely related to falcons, and then the parrots, and then of course all the perching birds. So we have those two big groups there, and we've got some other groups in here too. So actually, this one should have been moved over here. It got moved somehow. Okay, so let's take a break. I probably got your brain really hurting right now, so let's think about it. So here's the Titanus. They were maybe around here 100,000 years ago. This is a group that came up from South America, spread through North America. Unfortunately, they disappeared. Some of them fed on horse and horse relatives. This particular one probably stood 10 feet tall. Would you call it a raptor? I actually think some of these are out on the Olympics. I took a birding group out to the Olympics a couple years ago, and I sent this picture to them, and I said we were going to look for them. And because I think they're up some of those valleys out there. It was interesting. The only people that signed up were people who could run faster than me. Didn't understand that. So do you have any questions right now?
The question is asked, you're going to need to repeat it if you have your own.
Okay.
There's no questions on
Any questions in here? Yeah. Nope. Good. Okay. All right. Well, then let's keep going. So, okay. Let's start seeing if we can start to put some of this together and start to think about, all right, how do we get all of these cool birds? So I want to go back 100 million years ago, just a couple days ago, 100 million years ago. Here's what the continents looked like at about 90 million years ago, about 100 million years ago. A couple things that are good to notice on this. So this is at the height of the dinosaurs, right? Right midway through the height of the dinosaurs. So we've got kind of two big continent groups. We've got this upper part, Laurasia, the northern continents. Then we've got this lower part, Gondwana land, the lower continents. Notice it's all green. Antarctica down here is not frozen. Antarctica is not frozen. Matter of fact, South America is connected to Antarctica, and they're connected to Australia. You could say, I want to go get a cup of coffee. You're living in South America. You go walk over to Australia, get a cup of coffee. There's no ice. You don't have to walk through the ice there. So that's all kind of set up like that. So we've got that. Archaeopteryx, everybody kind of knows about Archaeopteryx. That was around about 150 million years ago. So by this time period, 100 million years ago, there were lots and lots and lots and lots of true birds. Lots and lots and lots of true birds. I couldn't find an exact number. I tried looking for that up, but I had read at one point that they said the diversity at this point might have been as diverse, if not more diverse, than what we have now in birds, but very dramatically looking different things. I got this book a couple years ago, and here's the copy of it right here. Fascinating. I can't pronounce a single one of the words in here, but it's fascinating. So during that time, there were lots of birds, and they varied a lot in their wings, in their tail. Did they have a long bony tail? Where and how do those feathers come off of the wings and the tail? Did they have little tiny teeth, or did they have a bill like the birds that we know of now? Just lots of variation with just incredible, fascinating diversity, and lots of them 100 million years ago. So let's go to 65, 70 million years ago. Still what's happening? All right, look at that. We still have the connection between South America and Antarctica. It's still green in Antarctica. We still got that connection over here to Australia. There's a huge gap here between Australia and Asia. Asia and North America is still connected. So we've got that kind of connection. And of course, what happens at 66 million years ago? Some rock came flying in here. So some rock comes flying in here. That's a number. Look at those dinosaurs, they see it coming. So, and notice, look at all of this. You know, one of the things, somebody has better eyes than I. To me, that looks like the artist drew some grass in there. Now, the trouble with that is grass didn't evolve until after this explosion. That's a more recent thing from that. But, and there's no birds in there. I couldn't believe it, no birds in there. Anyways, so we're still at that period. Now we're at about 65 million years ago. What happened? Well, killed off, that asteroid killed off 75, 80% of the terrestrial animals in the world. Just everything gone. Wiped out almost all those birds too. Yeah. Yeah, it's you know, it's this movie thing that I'm taking stuff out of, and so that movie thing was changing over into the tertial period, which is the modern period, but we hadn't got quite changed over. So, you know, I should have gone back and tried again and again and again until I got it right. But you know, at some point you go, okay, I hope this works. But somebody's too good at looking at these things. So who survived and where did they survive? You know, to me, that's a really interesting question. In the case of birds, what they think happened is the birds that had already evolved a bill, so a hard structure, and were terrestrial on the ground and were small, that's who survived. Same thing with mammals, not mammals didn't have the bill, but it was little tiny mammals that survived. It was things on the ground. It also is appearing now that 3 groups of birds made it through that catastrophe. And if you look at this, and we're going to look at this in on 3 successive slides, so I'm sure it's making you cross-eyed. It makes me cross-eyed, but it's still a heck of a lot of fun here. So, you know, if we go back, this point right in the middle is 100 million years ago. And then this point where we're seeing all of this circle around here, that was when that catastrophe happened. The asteroid hit, killed everything off. But these 3 lines here that come down here. So we have a line that comes down that resulted in all the rat tights and the tinamous, that whole group. Now they were little tiny and they could fly back then, but they apparently had the genetic ability to grow and to be gigantic things. So they spread around the southern continents, then became big later. The other groups that made it through is this group down here, which became all the gallinaceous birds, the turkeys and the chickens in that group, as well as all of the waterfowl. You're going to study those in a couple of weeks here, the ducks and the geese and all that. So those 2 groups. Then it was a different line that resulted in all the other birds we got. And there's 5 basic groups that it came out of here. And we're interested in 2 of them. We're interested in this red group and we're interested in this yellow group because that's where the raptors are. So you can see here's the falcon diving in here. That looks like a peregrine falcon in this red group. And then here we got a bunch of, there's the bald eagle looks like, and another eagle there. And there's a turkey vulture. I'm glad they got the turkey vulture in there, you know, coming out in that group. So that's the 2 groups we're interested in kind of considering some more. So let's go look at that. So we had apparently that first 5 million years happened to the mammals too. That first 5 million years, there's nothing out there. So these things could evolve really rapidly. And we got this fast, real diversification. So now I've kind of put you some timelines on here, 100 million years in the middle, 65 million years here. Over that first 5 million years over there, we had most of these groups all evolved. Some of them didn't come till much later. Songbirds, which is actually our largest group of birds, came way much later. And we'll look at that in a few minutes. So we had this kind of rapid diversification that took place. So if we're going to kind of look at that, here's just this is the more recent time, the Cenozoic, the tertiary period here. So we had the, down here at the bottom was when that asteroid hit. And then with this period of the Paleocene was when we had that really rapid diversification and the formation of lots of the different orders of birds we had now. And then we had lots more stuff happening up here. Eocene is really important. So we want to look at the Eocene next, 40 million years ago. So here we are, we're still at 60 million years ago. It's about 5 million years. So we got diversification taking place all over the place. And what do we still have? We still have a connection between South America and Antarctica. We still have a connection between Australia and Antarctica. Big gap over here up into Asia, North America, and Asia is connected, and Africa's kind of out here in the middle of nowhere. Still all green. So kind of keep that in mind, and we'll come back to that. So then Eocene, 40 million years ago. Right at about Eocene, we get this separation between South America and Antarctica, and we get a separation between Australia and Antarctica. And so what we form then is the Southern Oceans, the roaring 60s, where you get your sailboat there and man, you can zip. Of course, the waves are about 25 feet tall, but you know, Shackleton did it. So, so we get the Southern Oceans and that continuous flow of water all the way around, and Antarctica freezes up solid. Can't go for coffee now from South America over to Australia. Can't do it. So that's a really important kind of change. Let's kind of keep going on all of this. So then, you know, we'll get a little bit farther on here. No, oh, also I kept forgetting to mention, there's no connection between South America and North America either. We got water running through there. So that's really important. This is a little bit later, so we still have all of that process going on. So what do we get out of all of this? Now, this slide's really complicated. We're going to break it down in the next two slides, so hopefully it'll be a little bit better. But what do we want? What are we thinking about? We're thinking about raptors. Who are the raptors? Remember, we had that red group and we had that yellow group. So we had those two big groups there. So what do we have here? We've got the yellow group up at the top. So the yellow group includes the owls, the New World vultures, the hawks and eagles and that whole group. And then we've got the red group, which include, there we go, there's the word I couldn't think of. Seriamus, I know we pronounce it, okay, Seriamus, and then we've got the falcons and we've got the parrots and the songbirds down here in the red group. These guys, there's lots of evidence that shows these guys, this red group evolved in the southern continents. I could find nothing, whatever the right word there is, about where this whole group evolved. We'll make some conjectures. I'm going to throw out some hypotheses. I promise you they're going to be wrong, but they're hypotheses based upon what I know anyways right now. And we can watch them over the next few years. And then you guys can call me up and say, you got that wrong. And I'll say, yeah, I'll buy you a beer. So we've got these two groups. So let's kind of keep going on that. All right. So here's that yellow tree, that yellow group. So that's the group that includes our hawks and eagles and our owls, and then all of these other things, woodpeckers and puffin birds, and you know, all of these guys down here. Where there's my thing here. So we've got the New World vultures. Now remember, in that University of Minnesota's definition, they said all of the hawks and owls and eagles and the old world vultures, but not the New World vultures. Why throw them out? But anyways, the new one. So we've got that group. Then we've got the falcons. I mean, we've got the owls down here. Then we've got all of these other related groups. So we've got that yellow tree looking like that. Then we've got the red tree here. And this one's really fascinating. So this is the southern hemisphere tree. And so we've got the falcons down here, including the Seriamus. Now these are this name there that goes with the forest falcons and the laughing falcons that are in South America. Remember that, South America. And then this is the caracaras, which are South America too. Both of those groups have come up at least into Mexico and southern part of the United States. So, and then we've got the falcons, which are worldwide. The thing in black are worldwide. We've got the parrot groups. One of the parrot groups has gone worldwide. This is the New World parrots down here. And then we've got this whole perching bird group, which includes three major groups. It includes the New Zealand wrens, and there are only 2 living species. And then it's got the sub-Aussians. I hate that word, but that's the only one. The sub-Aussians is really big in South America. There's about 1,000 species. It includes the flycatchers, the cotingas, the antbirds, all that whole kind of group down there. And then we've got all of our songbirds. And we've got this group of songbirds that are only found in Australia. And then we've got the songbirds that have gone all over the world. 2 books, mention them just real quick. There's this one, which is really fascinating. It's a lot of what I'm talking about tonight's coming out of this book. In another 10 years or so, I might be able to understand this book. I got it. I thought that could be really great. I ordered it 6 months before it was published. It comes. Get a load of the type. Got to use a magnifying glass to read the type, and it's printed in a book this big too. So that's the largest AV radiation. But then the other one, which you might have heard about, is which kind of neat. It's much more popular written book, Where Song Began, and it's really good. Fortunately, he needed a really good editor because he's a university professor, kind of like me. So give him a break. But anyways, it's a fascinating book, and we'll go over in some fun ways a lot of what we're talking about tonight. So, okay, so we're going to change directions a little bit here and kind of come at this whole question from a little different angle. And so let's think about what a raptor is from the perspective of what do they eat? Vertebrates, insects, invertebrates of various kinds, carrion eaters. Now, if you've taken the raptor course or any other bird course from me, I harp like crazy to learn birds by using a lot of characteristics. So size and shape, color patterns, behaviors, habitat distributions, and calls, and I holler about those kinds of things for all birds. And with different groups of birds, different pieces of those are more important. In the case of raptors, it's shape and its behavior. And we're going to highlight some of that stuff as we go through. But distribution will pop in there, I think, in some really fun ways. So we're kind of keep working on it that way. So there's some concepts that I think you also are really good to ponder. This idea of convergent evolution. So what do we mean when we say convergent as evolution? It's developing similar characteristics, behaviors, in order to be able to exploit or live in a similar environment. So you might have 2 things coming along that are converging to do something similar, and as a result, they may look similar. Falcons are very different genetically, we know they're very different from the hawks and the eagles in groups. But when only looking at morphology, you go, oh, these things are similar. They must be related. That's convergent evolution. Divergent evolution is the opposite. You might have 2 things that are closely related, but they've gone in very different directions for one reason or another. And so they've had to develop traits that allow them to live in that new environment. And then there's this idea of genus, and it's for all of that list of things that I showed there. A bird in the same genus is thought to have a common ancestor. All the members of that same genus are. And so we're going to look at that, or we're going to play with some of the birds we see here and maybe look at them worldwide. So that's a really important one. The other thing is I want to talk a little bit about is this concept of primitive. And what do you mean by primitive when we use it and we're talking about animals and evolution? Primitive is when there's not been a dramatic change over the millennia, so things are relatively same as you look along. So it's something that evolved a long time ago and you keep it for a long time. That's known as a primitive state, a primitive condition. So primitive in phylogenetics is it's an inherited thing that comes from way back rather than being something more recent. but it doesn't mean that animal is primitive. And here's where, when a lot of times when you read in the literature, read in the newspapers, oh, it drives me nuts. I go mad, start throwing things. No, I don't throw things, but when they say, oh, the platypus, that's a primitive animal. No, no, no. A platypus lays an egg. That trait of laying an egg is primitive when you compare it to the marsupials. When you then compare it to the placentals like us, you would say egg laying in a platypus is primitive trait. But the platypus has had the same amount of time to evolve as everything else. And the platypus is actually a highly adapted, highly specialized animal, maybe too highly specialized for a certain kind of aquatic environment in Eastern Australia. So it is not a primitive animal. Subtle, huh? But it's a good point to kind of keep in mind. All right, now let's start getting into some of this stuff and say, all right, what do we have here? What I'm going to tell you right now is my conjecture. This is my hypothesis. I haven't found anything that proves this, but here's the data that I'm going on. You look at the falcon group. What do we have in the falcon group? We've got 4 members of the falcon group. We've got the Syriamus. We've got these guys, which I won't pronounce. I'll let you guys pronounce that. But that's the forest falcons and the laughing falcons. And then we've got the caracaras. And then we've got the falcons. These 3 groups are only found in South America, some of which have extended up through Panama and into Central America. Few, like caracara, have gone all the way up in the United States. I think, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest it, that the falcons probably originally evolved in South America. They were separated during that they were maybe all the way across, or the ancestor of them were all the way across, but they got separated into South America when it got cut off in the Eocene when the Antarctica froze. And that gave them a chance to really evolve and take off in various ways. And we'll look at that in a few more places here too. So South America was critical for them. Now, let's just look at a little bit more. So we're still in that red group. So we were just looking at falcons. They got stuck here in South America. Although I don't know, I was just down there in South America this summer, down about here in Brazil, and it's spectacular. So I shouldn't have used that word. You guys should have thrown stones at me. Stuck in South America is prejudice. It is spectacular. So they were here and evolved down here, is what it looks like. The parrots are really interesting stuff. And again, what I read when I came back from Australia in 2015, and then what I was reading as I was getting ready for this, it's changed in the last 5 years in terms of how they think parrots spread around the world. But the best evidence suggests that parrots originally evolved, there's my cursor, over here in Australia, probably here before it froze. They got across here and up into South America, and we've got the New World parrots that got stuck in South America. Oh, there, that did it again. We got the New World parrots that really radiated in South America in lots of ways. What changed now from 2015 to now is now they think the African parrots are actually closely related in this group of parrots, where in 2015 they were thinking they came from over here and went around this way, but now they're saying that it's the other. So much new genetics, again, stirring that pot. But we've got lots of kinds of parrots over here. Now, if we go up to the perching birds, we've got the New Zealand wrens. They got stuck out here, and they got out here in New Zealand. They may well have been all over the place, and they've just been out competed in every place else. Then we had the subausines, that group that includes ant pittas and pittas in the old worlds, and flycatchers that we have up here, and ovenbirds that are not our ovenbird, a warbler, but an ovenbird that's down in South America, a whole big family of them, all little brown jobbies that look the same. So they were the first of the perching birds to kind of spread all over the place. Cursor back. probably all the way across to Antarctica and up into South America. But the songbirds hadn't evolved yet. And then it froze down here in Antarctica in the Eocene. And then over here in Australia, the songbirds evolved. And some of these first songbirds here, like this guy is, you may have heard of him. Why did it just name? Don't get old like me. I keep forget things here when you need them. Lyrebirds, you might have heard of lyrebirds. You have just spectacular ability to mimic things. This is the lyrebirds. That's that group right there that I just lost here, lyrebirds. So we have, some of these old world songbirds that are only found in Australia. And then we got the regular songbirds evolved, and then they took over the world. And they did. There are 10,000 species of birds in the world, 10,500, whatever the number is. Over 6,000 of them are perching birds. Over 5,000 of them are songbirds. So these two little groups up here, 5,000 birds in those two little groups. All the rest, all other birds are the other 5,000. We call this the time of the mammals. I never understood that. There's what, 4,000 some mammals in the world? Most of them are rats. This should be the time of the songbirds. All right, let's go to this other group. The hawks and the eagles and the owls. What do we know about them? So here they are. Where are they? They're over here. So we got a barn owl flying out. We got the eagles here. We've got the turkey vultures. So interesting. Again, this is all conjecture. I could not find anything on some of this stuff. And I looked around in lots of different places. And sure, I bet if I went down another few times to the University of Washington Library, maybe I'd find something, but I didn't find it yet. The New World vultures are found lots of South America, and then of course up into North America. And then the hawks and eagles in that group are found all over the world. We've got another group though, the secretary bird, which is in this group, is found only in Africa. So where did these guys evolve? I don't know. It's interesting. Maybe they spread around a lot and then got isolated, and we got the New World vultures coming off of something that probably didn't even look like a vulture. Who knows? If you look at the owls, barn owls, that family of barn owls, we only have one barn owl here, but that family of barn owls is more primitive than what they call the true owls. There's several species of barn owls in Australia, like 3 or 4. I think there's only like 8 or 10 total, but so did they evolve there, or did they just get out competed with the rest of the world? We don't have enough fossil information to figure that out, but really kind of interesting. All right, take another way of looking at stuff. Let's look at this all from a different perspective. What do they eat? If you want to eat snakes and really specialize on steaks, what's good? Get long legs and walk a lot. So what do we have? Look at these two birds. We've got secretary bird here in Africa. They come out of that hawk and eagle group. And then we've got the Seriamas here in South America. They come out of the falcon group. So we've got convergent evolution in order to do similar thing. Walk around, look for snakes. Maybe you want to eat fish. Here's some fish eaters, our bald eagle, of course. Look at this. Doesn't that look like a bald eagle down there to you? But with the wrong feather colors? It's in the same genus. That's an Australian white-tailed eagle. Then, of course, we've got the osprey. And then this is down in Brazil. That's a black-shouldered hawk. And it has the same thing that ospreys have. It has little serrations on its talons to help hold on to the fish. It's a major fish eater. Sure, it will take other stuff, but it's a major fish eater. So maybe you still want to eat fish, but you're an owl. There are fish-eating owls that really specialize in it. If you've never read this book, that's a good book to write down and read. It's just really fascinating. It's about a graduate student who goes off to Africa and off to Russia in order to study the largest owl in the world. And it's just, you get his story, his interaction with the Russians, which is all positive. And then, this bird in there, and it's just a really fun book. Raptors, do they eat frogs, crayfish, and snakes? All right, red-shouldered hawks, would get them in up here, but down in Florida, and I worked for a long time in Florida, including on a ranch in Central Florida, and these two were there. Barred owls on the right, red-shouldered hawks on the left. They divided that habitat up, daytime, nighttime. They ate frogs like crazy. They ate frogs like crazy. They ate crayfish. They went for all of that kind of wetland kinds of stuff down there. So, specialized, but divide it now by the day. What happens if you want to eat birds? Okay, falcons in the genus Falco are very much bird specialists. They have long pointed wings, a good tail for maneuvering. They're fly like fast and they just run things down. This is an accipiter, a Cooper's hawk. They're also bird specialists. They've got short rounded wings and a long tail. They're designed for fast maneuverability in through the trees, and they run down birds that way. This guy is a northern pygmy owl, ferocious bird eater. He was sitting there on a branch up in the Okanagan when I was up there a few years ago, hunting chickadees. And the chickadees weren't happy. They were scolding from all around there, but he was hunting chickadees. And again, that fast pursuit kind of hunting there for that. If you're a mammal eater, two strategies for mammal eating. One's to sit and wait. So here we've got a rough-legged hawk sitting and waiting. Another strategy is to get up high and soar. Golden eagles are a perfect example of that. They can hunt from thousands of feet up and then spot something and then they drop down, swoop down on it. Or like our northern harrier, they just have that low glide. Notice they've got a very long tail. They've also got long, narrow wings. All of that is designed for fast maneuverability. And they come in low over the marsh. You've probably seen that. And then if they spot a mouse or hear a mouse, it's just boom, down really quick. Sit and wait predators. Here's a great horned owl sitting and waiting, looking for stuff. Now I threw in here, because this is kind of interesting. There's a gyrfalcon. In a lot of places, gyrfalcons feed a lot on snowshoe hares. I think they hunt them very much the way they hunt birds. They just chase them down like crazy. And I've seen a few photographs, movies on like PBS, and they're just chasing the snowshoe hare across there as if they were chasing a bird. But it works. So. All right, what about snails? I can't be a raptor if you eat snails. All right, snail kites, North America. These are snail kites, big in South America. Hookbill kites are also a South American one. Now, what I couldn't figure out is if there were any birds in Africa that specialized on snails that we would call raptors. And I couldn't figure that out. I did a lot of looking there, but not enough. I didn't look at every single bird in Africa. There are a lot of snails in Africa. So, I don't know. Interesting thing. Insects and little stuff. And yes, some of these things do take birds too, but we've got kestrel, we've got saw-whet owl, we've got black-shouldered kite. That's an African bird, but we've got the white-tailed kite here. They take a lot of little things here. What about carrion? We've got our New World vultures. Remember, University of Minnesota said they aren't raptors, but these guys are raptors, the Old World vultures. And that's interesting. The Old World vultures, if you look now, used to be, I think when I was in graduate school, they put them off as a whole separate family. Now they're embedded in the middle of the hawks and eagles group. They're right there in the middle. So it's, something that have evolved out of one that was more like a hawk and an eagle into becoming a carrion eater. Who else eats carrion? Well, in the falcon group, we've got caracaras feed a lot on carrion in areas, but we have lots of other stuff. There's black kites in Australia, the wedge-tailed eagle. Oh my God, I've only seen one at a gazillion miles away. but it is bigger than our bald eagle by like 2 feet. I mean, this thing is big. And then a couple years ago, I saw in the newspaper there where one of these things took out a drone, a $75,000 drone. It just, bam, hit it in the back of the drone, and that drone broke in half and fell down. And then, of course, in a lot of places, bald eagles, they rely on fish. My brother-in-law, I was raised in Western Pennsylvania. My brother-in-law lives in Northwestern Pennsylvania, and sometimes I've gone up to him in the spring, and we go up to a state park near where he lives. And at that park, the lake was all frozen over. When it thaws in the spring, because it's not a real deep lake, it has a big fish kill. And there'd be 150 bald eagles up there. They're living on the dead fish. Okay, let's keep going on this kind of thing. So caracaras. So someplace here, here's our caracara that gets in the United States, crested caracara. But there's a bunch of caracaras in Central and South America. One of them, this guy, specializes in eating wasps and bees and ants and termites. Is that a raptor? Oh my God, eating wasps is a raptor? Okay, but anyway, a lot of these guys, they're omnivores. And in Florida, I worked on a cattle ranch for 3 years, and when they would burn some of the pastures in the spring to kind of generate the new grass for the cows, boy, while they were burning, we'd have 30 or 40 caracaras on the ranch when there was only a single pair that nested on the ranch. But they would come in and follow that fire, and they're going after the mice and whatever else they could find. So they're opportunistic. Okay, I want to go to, just this concept of genera and look at some of our genera that we have here in North America, and what do they look like when you kind of look at them worldwide. So remember this kind of classification system. We've been talking about birds from here, class down, and we've gone over orders, and we've got a bunch of orders that we have these raptors in, and then more families. So genus and species is what our individual species are. So we have a genera and then a species name, and so you often see that binomial name that identifies that individual species. So let's look at a few of those. Heliatus, that's the bald eagles. 10 species in the world. Look at them. They all look very similar. So here's our bald eagles, the various pictures here in North America. But if you go to other parts of the world, you go look, oh my God, that's a bald eagle just with not the right feathers on, right? So here's a white-bellied eagle. That's in Australia. Here's the African fish eagle. It's in Africa. They look a lot alike. Accipiters. There's 47 accipiters in the world. So accipiters, remember, that's like our sharp-shinned hawk and Cooper's hawk. They're bird eaters. They're short, rounded wings with a long tail that can really fly fast through the trees and run down the critters that come to your bird feeder probably like crazy and feed on birds that you're crazy. We all feed at 2 levels when we feed birds, right? And look at that. That's the Eurasian sparrowhawk. But boy, you look at that and you say, oh, wow, that looks a lot like a sharp-shinned hawk, doesn't it? But we've got all of these. So we look at ours. So here's the ones we have in Washington. We've got the sharp-shinned hawk, we've got the Cooper's hawk, and then the magnificent big northern goshawk. But you run over to Australia, look at that. So I saw that guy in Australia. I go, oh my gosh, that's Cooper's hawk, right? Of course, you would have instantly known when I put that up there. I didn't have to say anything. You would have said, oh, that's a eucalyptus, so I know I'm in Australia. Okay, this is a brown goshawk. So that's what they call it, a brown goshawk over there. But it's in that accipiter. And you got that same body shape, but we've got that same bird in another part of the world. And you would see that and you'd go, okay, that's an accipiter. Now I can go to the book and start to look that up. So, we've got that kind of parallelism going across. Let's do a couple more here. So we've got the buteos, like our rough-legged hawk here, our red-tailed hawk. Those are all buteos. So here's our buteos of Washington, red-tailed hawks, red-shouldered hawk, ferruginous, Swainson's, which is down in South America right now, and rough-legged hawks. Oh yeah, the Swainson's hawks feed a lot on grasshoppers. They can't possibly be a raptor then. Who would eat a grasshopper, right? So this is really interesting. Ospreys, just one species found all over the world. But look at its breeding distribution. I find this really interesting. So it breeds, come back here, osprey. So it breeds all across the northern hemisphere, but it also breeds all around northern Australia and up here in, New Guinea and some of the South Pacific islands. In winters, these ones that go up here fall south to winters, so that's kind of interesting. Hypothesis. I got absolutely zero evidence for this. Did these guys evolve over here in Australia and then spread around the world? I don't know. Ospreys, cool birds. These guys are cool. The genus Elanus. So our white-tailed kites, which I have not seen one in Washington. You can see them if you go south of here and find them. And then I've seen them in California. You go farther south, you can see them. There's 4 members in that genus. And oh my God, they look the same. They have this other concept called superspecies. And superspecies is when you have 3 or 4 things in the same genus that all are really, really similar. And so it's clear they had a very immediate common ancestor. And then, in this case, probably the common ancestor to all 4 of these guys spread around the world at some point, and then they evolved into a different species in the New World and a different species in Africa and in Asia here. And then we have 2 of them in Australia. I've seen this one, but I've not seen this one yet. So I gotta get back there again. So, but here's, well, oh, sure. I mean, they can't, they're just excellent flyers. So yeah. So here's the white-tailed kite. That's what we have, white-tailed kite. But if you looked at these guys, I would say, oh man, there's white-tailed kite, but you're in Africa. So these guys are not white-tailed kites. They're black-shouldered kites. And they do have a little bit of differences in the colors under their wings. And so that's what you have to look for to identify them. But they're not in the same place. So just use distribution. Circus. So that's the northern harrier is in our genus. But you look at, is in this genus. You look at that guy. You look at that. You might say, oh boy, that looks a lot like a harrier. It is. It's the swamp harrier. It's found in Australia. So we have all of these harriers, same kind of body shape. My guess is they do the same thing. I've seen 2 species in Australia and they both kind of fly low, just the way our northern harriers do. So we've got northern harriers. Falcons. 39 species of falcons. They vary from little tiny guys to big guys over the world. And of course, here's our falcons. We've got the Merlin and the peregrine and the American kestrel and the gyrfalcon and the prairie falcon. So all up here. If you saw this guy, what would you say? Oh, what genus is that? It's a falcon, right? This is the greater kestrel found in Africa. And I got off a little plane in Mbosi National Park and turned around and saw these 2 guys there. And I go, I know they're falcons, but that's about all I know. So we had to figure them out, but that's okay. How about owls? Bubo. I love that name, Bubo. So great horned owl is a bubo, as is snowy owl, as is this guy, an eagle owl found in Africa. It's this one right here. I'll let you pronounce that name, Vernix. But you just saw that thing. When I saw that thing, I go, oh my God, that's a great horned owl. But it wasn't. I did see one when I was down in Brazil this last summer. I go, oh my God, that's a great horned owl. And you know what it was? It was a great horned owl. There's our great horned owl, also in that genus Bubo. Snowy owl, also in that genus Bubo. Strix is another big genus, 19 species around the world. We've got great gray owls here. We also have barred owls and spotted owls. Placidium. I think that's the right pronunciation. Lots of those species. Little tigers. I think that's what they ought to be called, little tigers. So here's our northern pygmy owl, but you have a whole bunch of them all over the world. They're not in Australia. and in Antarctica, but they're all over the place and look very similar. Look at that guy. Can you say what genus that is? Look kind of like a golden eagle, right? Now this is actually a tawny eagle from Africa, but we got that there. All right. So what do you feel about raptors now? How do you feel about them? Just fascinating group of things. We want to ponder about them. So, here's the kind of buteo. That's a roadside hawk. There's our secretary bird. Here's the sea eagle from Australia. Here's the fish eagle from Africa. Here's that bubo, the eagle owl, and this is a little eagle from Australia. So let's turn it over for questions. Thank you very much. Yeah. I'm sorry. So roadrunners are in the cuckoo family? That's a good question. I didn't think of throwing a roadrunner in there at the beginning. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, for sure. And they run down lizards and all kinds of stuff and birds. Yeah. So they're in the cuckoo family. Yeah, but that'd be another one. Why aren't they a raptor too? Right? Yes. So penguins, I'd have to go back to that slide to see if it shows where the penguins are related to in that overall group. Let me see if I can find that. There's penguins up here at the top in this blue group. So see, penguins are up here in this blue group. So they're with kind of a whole bunch of the seabirds, the albatrosses and cormorants, it looks like, and pelicans all up there. So they're kind of closely related to that. Good example of, you want to be able to fly underwater. Penguins are the best at flying underwater because they've gotten them down to little tiny flippers. Our alcids up here, like merlets and guillemots, they're trying to do both. They want to fly through the air and fly through the water. Give me a break. So to fly through the air, they got to flap incredibly fast because they don't have big enough wings to fly through the air. And they're probably not as good flying through the water as they would be if they'd become a penguin. But they're trying to do the same thing. Again, that's convergent evolution. Excellent question. Anything else? Any questions from the online folks? Okay. Yep.
About the snail hawk or
Snail kites. Yep.
So that is physically able to do a lot more than that snail.
So our snail kites eat snails, period.
So they evolved probably eating something
Probably,
harder to get.
yeah.
And wound up somewhere where they didn't have that.
Right. Then they just specialized on snails. As far as I know, the snail kite only eats snails. Now the other one that I showed, I'm not sure. That may eat some other stuff. We'd have to go back and look it up. But yeah, snail kites are just really specialized. And in Florida, they eat only apple snails, just one kind of snail. Now there's an African snail that's been introduced since I was working on Everglades issues. And I don't know if they take that or not. That'd be fascinating. But that was why I don't understand there's not something specialized on African snails, in Africa. So I was surprised not to find a bird there. I also thought there was an owl in Latin America that fed a lot on fish, but I couldn't find that when I went looking for it. So maybe I was getting mixed up with something else. But yeah, snail kite has a very interesting hook bill, and it's all designed for going into that and taking off the operculum and then pulling out the insides in there. So it's a really very specialized apparatus for getting that meat out. Okay, anything else? Yes. I'm sorry. Oh yeah. Oh, the last one. Oh. Oh, no, that's my website. This one? Yeah, Enchanted by the Wild. It's my blog. So That's my blog. So I will post stories about birds on my blog. Yeah, but I'm hopefully going to have a book coming out next year. But so we're hoping. I'm hoping. So, anything else?
About near extinction, in particular, because of some assumptions.
Mhm.
So, first of all, I'm not real clear about how it was, we think of our big die-off with DDT and, nearly lost eagles and ospreys, and was that, okay, this is the first question, is that worldwide? I mean, do you know if that was?
Yes.
Throughout, okay. So our comeback, do you find that, have you known if they refilled, range, or if the range sort of changing back in different ways that no man usually call?
It's still, they're still coming back in lots of places. But yeah, no, excellent question. So DDT, so the question was, what did DDT do and how did it affect birds? And DDT caused a thinning of the eggshells and an increased chance that eggs would get crushed when the parents tried to incubate them, and also an increase in the dying of the embryo within eggs. So some of both of that kinds of stuff. And it seems to affect certain birds more than other kinds of birds. And hawks and eagles and falcons and raptors in general were all really badly affected by it. And it caused major population crashes. Take the bald eagle. I was raised in Western Pennsylvania. In the 1960s, when I was in high school, my buddies and I would do an annual pilgrimage up to northwestern Pennsylvania to go to Lake Pymatuning to look for bald eagle. There were 3 remaining pairs of bald eagles in 5-state area: Western New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. Maybe that's only 4 states. But in that 4-state area, only one of those pairs still laid an egg, and those eggs never hatched. So they were gone. They were disappearing, right? They were gone. So we would go up there every year to look for them so we could, see them out there. There's over 300 nesting pairs of bald eagles in Pennsylvania now. And I just got a text message from a friend who took a video of a bald eagle flying over the farm I was raised on. The farm I was raised on is like 8 miles from the Allegheny River, but they're now nesting down on the Allegheny River. There's no way I had ever dreamed of seeing a bald eagle at my house. So incredible recovery. Same thing has happened with lots of other stuff. So again, when I was in high school, you never saw Cooper's hawks. They nest in suburbia all over the place now. They've adapted to nest in suburbia. They really do well, probably here on Whidbey Island in Seattle. I had them nesting in my neighbor's yard when I lived in Maryland. Just incredible recovery there. Combination, not getting shot anymore, really helps. They used to be, my dad would call them chicken hawks. I was raised on a chicken farm. So there's a combination of recovery there. Same thing with peregrine falcons. Now the problem with peregrine falcons is we lost some of the kinds of peregrine falcons around the world. They're not there anymore. So we've reintroduced them. We humans have reintroduced them, but they're using genetics from tundra species, which were far enough away they weren't as badly affected by DDT. But we now have them spreading back out. So you've got 3 pairs that nest in Seattle now. And, some apparently, so the males will tend to stay around in the area where they're raised. The females would disperse. They had one of the females there who's now nesting up in natural habitat, someplace in the South Cascades. So, it's happening. It's slow, but, it's happening. And they haven't stopped the use of DDT in lots of places in the world. So, it's still a concern and a problem. And that DDT breaks down to DDE, I think. And then that just spreads around the world incredibly and moves up through one of the problems with those kinds of pesticides is they accumulate in the fat. So in fish, there's not very dense, but then that gets eaten and then it gets magnified. It goes up the food chain. So.
Wouldn't it make more sense to distinguish between herbivorous birds and seed eaters with maybe a section for the omnivores?
So the question was, wouldn't it make sense to distinguish between seed eaters, meat eaters, and omnivores? Sure. I think, we didn't come back and me quiz you now. What do you call a raptor? The word raptor is a conglomerate idea in our minds, I think. And, whatever makes you understand and appreciate these birds more, I think that's great. And, with seed eating, we could do the same thing with seed eating. So here in North America, we have a lot of what are called in the scientific terminology, New World sparrows. And you look at them, you see a song sparrow, or you see a white crowned sparrow or a golden crowned sparrow. They all look kind of like that. You go over to Europe, you're going to see things that look very similar. They aren't at all closely related. It's a whole different branch of birds that have all become adapted to eat seeds. So we've got that same kind of thing. Even here, we've got the introduced house sparrow, but we also got the native house finch, which also comes from a whole separate line of birds. And again, I think if we go back to the bird books and look at that, you would see they were lumped together at one time in the past. I did bring that book and then forgot to mention it at one point. So I use Sibley a lot. I also use Peterson's Field Guide a lot in the field. This version of Sibley's from the 1990s. It's still got the taxonomy from when I was in high school. But I bought a couple years ago this Peterson Field Guide, which is a Peterson Field Guide to Bird Songs of Western North America by Nathan Pipolo. It was just published a couple years ago. You flip through that, they're all in a different order because he's following the 2015 kind of classification system. My guess is, when a new Sibley's come out, whenever you're doing the next one or new Petersons, you're going to see everything all shuffled around. So, yeah. But good question. Anything else?
Yeah, another check. Need advice on constructing a local taxonomy for birding around South Whidbey.
So the question was, any advice on a taxonomy for birding around South Whidbey? One idea is you pull up like Merlin and you just use the Yap Merlin and you go in there and you do explore birds, and then you limit it to your local area and explore birds, and it is going to give you the birds in what Cornell's taxonomic order is right at that point. So you'll get just that sub list that's in what Cornell's taxonomic order is right now, the eBird taxonomic order. So that would be the way I do it. And I do something very similar. Like I'm going to Africa, I hope, and Uganda and Tanzania in February and March. And so I use a combination of eBird and Merlin and books, and I try to figure out like the bird guide to Kenya in that area has 1,200 species in it. Forget it, you're not going to learn that. So, I tried to narrow it down by doing just that kind of thing, is, use those tools to say, what's the 100 birds I ought to learn? Because maybe I can do that. I'm really old, so, I can't stuff a lot in there. Any question? Yeah. Correct. So falcons are more closely related to parrots and perching birds. Yes, so parrots and perching birds. Perching birds include the songbirds. So yeah. Genetics. So they went in and they looked at a combination of the genes in their chromosomes, and they looked at the genes in their mitochondria, and they realized, oh, these two groups, these hawks and falcons, aren't really that closely related. And then when they looked at the genes in the falcons and the genes in the parrots, they said, oh, these guys are more closely related. So it has to do with how they're looking at the actual genes. So it's almost, as if they use what's it? Two M3 or whatever that one is, that we could get our own genetics done, and then you trace back. So they've done that kind of thing. And that's actually the next level. They're starting to do a whole genome analysis, and they want to do a whole genome analysis to try to kind of figure out the next level of understanding there. So it's going to get all hopefully I'm going to live long enough to see it all get chewed up and turned upside down again, so.
Totally, nothing like birds.
Right.
And that's what convergent evolution.
A lot of convergent evolution, yeah. So what you're seeing is convergent evolution. So the falcons evolved in my interpretation, the falcons evolved in South America in order to become predators. And the hawks and the owls evolved someplace else in the world, I don't know where, in order to become predators. Then they both have been very successful and they've overlapped. So, they've kind of gone. So like here in Washington, we've got falcons and they hunt birds like crazy. They hunt them by fast pursuit. So out in the open going like crazy, where we've got accipiters, which also hunt birds, but they're more stealth in their hunting. They sneak around through the woods, and then it's a really fast chase kind of the birds down. So it's convergent evolution to hunt birds in those two cases. Yeah.
Similarities between falcons and parrots, like in the speed of flight and food handling.
I think you're right. Oh, yes. The question was, aren't there other similarities between parrots and falcons? And absolutely. You look at their feet, to me, their feet look very similar. Now, parrots have a lot of dexterity in their feet, maybe more dexterity than what you see in falcons, but there's people that are a lot more flexible than I am. So, that's something that they could have evolved over time. And my guess is there's lots of other stuff like what you mentioned there, that you would look at anatomical stuff that are similar, as well as behavioral things, probably like how they fly and stuff. Yeah. All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you all very much. All right.
I want to thank Tom, and also want to mention that Nathan Pipolo is one of our upcoming presenters.
Oh, he's fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. You're welcome.